Oceangate, Stockton Rush, Narcissist, Part 9. We continue with an analysis of suitable excerpts from the interview that took place between the journalist David Pogue and Stockton Rush that took place last year. Pogue asks, surely there was some pushback when you're like, I'm going to design my sub to take non-scientists to the Titanic out of a material that hasn't been used before. Rush, yes, when you're trying something outside the box, people inside the box think you're nuts. Again, this shows the pioneering nature of Mr. Rush and how he perceives observations about him which might be legitimate as seeing him as portrayed as nuts. Pogue asks, what's the virtue of the carbon fibre? Rush explains, it's 3 times better on a strength-to-buoyancy basis than titanium, and so that's in underwater. That's what you care about. By having a light hull, you have a smaller vessel. Therefore, you can have a smaller ship. Everything starts to get not easier, but it's different and a little bit easier. Pogue then explains that Rush gave him a tour of the inside. Rush says, shoes off. That's customary. Notice that there's no, would you take your shoes off? He barks, in effect, the order at him. Shows entitlement. Pogue goes, okay, thank you. He continues, wow, it's like a minivan. Rush says, yes, it's a Suburban. It's a little bigger than you would think. Pogue, it's a good size. Rush, so this is not your grandfather's submersible. Most of the deep diving subs were made with a purpose. It's a science tool. So there wasn't a lot of thought given to creature comforts, which tend to be spheres. They're small, they're cramped, they don't have a toilet. Toilet? Asked Pogue. Rush, we have a toilet. Well, kind of. If you have to go to the bathroom during the dive, you can crawl into the window end of the sub and hang up a black cloth for privacy. There's an 18-inch square box on the floor that contains Ziploc bags, and that's your toilet. Stockton promises that they turn up the music really loud while you're in the bathroom. There are a couple of touchscreen PC monitors on the floor of the sub, but otherwise, there are no controls in this thing. Pogue, wait a minute. I've seen submersibles and there are banks of controls, cockpit after cockpit. Rush responds, exactly. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you can have a lot of buttons and things like that, or you can use modern technology to make it simple. Pogue asks, so how can you drive it? Rush, we run the whole thing with this game controller. Pogue responds, come on. Rush says this thing is made for a 16-year-old to throw it around and we keep a couple of spares. Pogue then remarks, I'm not kidding. He drives his multi-million-dollar sub with a white plastic Xbox game controller. And that's not the only part of this sub that seemed kind of jerry-rigged. Take, for example, the ceiling lights. Rush states, so, yes, I got these from Camper World, and they are LED lights in here, and nice little decorative feature. Pogue says, and then there are the cameras. Rush states, we have a number of cameras that are actually security cameras. A lot of subs have custom-made video capture systems because it gives them a lot of flexibility. But we got rid of that and just saying, look, we just want to capture the image. No, we can use these off-the-shelf components. Is it the case that the use of the off-the-shelf components is a clever way of cost-cutting, or is it reckless? Pogue goes on to state, later when I interviewed Rush at his headquarters near Seattle, I asked him about this. Pogue states, it seems like this submersible has some elements of MacGyvery, jigginess. You're like, we bought these handles off camperworld.com. You're like, these thrusters are modified from some other purpose. Rush responds, I don't know if I'd use that description of it, but there are certain things that you want to be buttoned down, and that's the pressure value. The pressure value is the carbon fibre tube, that part that keeps the human beings alive. So the pressure vessel is not MacGyver at all, because that's where we work with Boeing and NASA and the University of Washington. That part, once the pressure vessel is, you're certain it's not going to collapse on everybody. Everything else can fail. It doesn't matter. Your thrusters can go, your lights can go, all these things can fail. You're still going to be safe, and so on. That allows you to do what you call MacGyver stuff. You just have to be very careful that the life support system, the sub itself, the oxygen system, the carbon dioxide scrubbing, all that stuff needs to be buttoned down. Notice that he doesn't take kindly, of course, to the suggestion of what he's doing being a sort of MacGyver-y jerry-riggedness, but he doesn't explode. He provides a polished response. If he is a narcissist, this tends to suggest that he's not somebody that would necessarily have a low threshold on his ignited fury. Indeed, he comes across as a polished, quite calm individual. Yes, he's dismissive and haughty, but he doesn't erupt with shouting. He doesn't lambast people. Poe continues by stating, "Surely I'm not the first layperson to say, I can't believe this isn't a more finished, solid state-of-the-art NASA electronic. I mean, you're putting construction pipes as ballast." Rush responds, "People are surprised by it, and not people in the industry, because that's what they do. I mean, the French had bags of stuff they dropped. The Russians use just steel shot with a little magnetic release and they drop it. All deep-diving subs are prototypes." The interview then turns to the question of the waiver, which reads as follows. "The experimental submersible vessel has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body. Any failure could cause severe injury or death. The support vessel is an industrial vessel not designed for passenger operations and present many hazards, including property damage, injury, disability, or death. If I choose to assist in the servicing of the submersible, I will be exposed to high-pressure gases, high-voltage electrical systems, and other dangers that could lead to property damage, injury, disability, and death. I hereby assume full responsibility for the risk of bodily injury, disability, death." Pogue then remarks, I was actually scared." Now, with this waiver, is this being upfront and honest, or is it a recklessness of explaining basically this thing has been cobbled together and there are loads of risks and you're just going to have to waive them? Rush continues by explaining, there's a limit. At some point safety just is pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. At some point, you're going to take some risk, and it really is a risk-reward question. I think I can do this just as safely by breaking the rules. He's often been quoted in this regard, and of course, his belief, was it well placed? Well, there were lots of people that disagreed with him. There were lots of people that said he shouldn't be doing this. There were lots of people who said that it was doomed. They turned out to be right. He was wrong. Pogue then asks about the whole danger thing. How dangerous is it? Rush, I don't think it's very dangerous. Now, this is an interesting observation. He, of course, doesn't think this way either, because he's undertaken many activities in the submersible and has deemed them always to be a success. Or he's an individual that doesn't necessarily recognize danger and is dismissive of it. It doesn't concern him. He continues by saying, if you look at submersible activity over the last 3 decades, there hasn't even been a major injury. Again, this is utilizing in a hypocritical way the information that I told you about earlier. There hasn't even been a major injury, let alone a fatality. What worries us is not once you're underwater. What worries me is when I'm getting you there, when you're on the ship in icy states with big doors that can crush your hands, and people who may not have the best balance who fall down, bang their head. That, to me, is the dangerous part. But the scary part for most people is going down to 6,000 psi. Pogue says, yes, it's counterintuitive. I certainly wouldn't expect life on the surface ship to be the dangerous part. Rush responds, yes. More indicators with regard to Rush's response to the questioning, and we will continue in part 10 with further analyses of what's being said in this interview to glean more information about what Stockton Rush is. Join me there.